Thank you, Mr. Peters. Mr. Chairman, I think I'll yield myself 5 minutes. All right. Thank you. There's a lot of temptation sitting at this seat. Make a lot of decisions, but the biggest temptation is this muffin that's sitting right here in front of me. I'm quite sure if you had that set up. Anyway, I want to thank the panel for being here and taking time. A lot of good insight, a lot of good history, and I certainly know that this is an issue that's very important to my state. I certainly appreciate the other senator from Nevada that was here earlier and her questioning, and I know this is just as important to our chairman here in South Dakota as it is in the state of Nevada. But I want to share real quickly, briefly, a success story that we have in the state of Nevada, and it's an electric company called Valley Electric Association. It's located in a small city just outside of Las Vegas called Pahrump. Most people do think of it as just an electric company, but they have a great story about their recent success in broadband deployment. They partnered with a company out of Las Vegas called Switch, and I'm certain that most of you are familiar with Switch, where they were able to run a 1 gig fiber option line from Las Vegas to Reno. I don't know that I've heard of any other 1 gig fiber optic highway that runs nearly 500 miles through some of the smallest rural communities that we have in the state. And I would argue that there aren't even urban areas in the state of Nevada that have this kind of access for their schools, their hospitals, and even some of their residents. But Valley Electric helped engineer this path. They prepared the polls. They submitted the applications to get all this done. And it's because they saw a bigger picture. And this invitation that I had to spend time with them, they went through this and the success that they were able to see. They do know this, that if communities don't have broadband, the people will leave. And that has been a concern for the rural portions of our state. You can't operate a school. You can't operate a hospital or a business. We have communities in our state that you can't even swipe a debit card because they don't have access. But the fiber route that they prepared is like a highway. So, and most of you are aware of this, you need off-ramps. And so they're building those broadband off-ramps, and they're facing some serious barriers. So they have the fiber, but it's the off-ramps now that are causing the problems, and their problems mostly come with the Bureau of Land Management. Sandy Valley, Nevada is a good example. They already have the electric lines that were permitted into that valley. They just need to add the cables for broadband. And it's taken 10 months of filing the application, and yet after 10 months, they still do not have approval. Federal agencies like BLM are hamstringing private companies that are using their own money to invest and expand infrastructure into places no one else wants to expand. Valley Electric will face the same challenges in Armagosa Valley, Beatty, Nevada, and every rural town that DC has probably never heard of, but ones that most of us have visited at one time or another in our own states. I believe that people in these communities deserve broadband, and Valley Electric told me that the delayed applications from the federal land agencies is the #1 barrier to broadband deployment. So I have legislation I'm working on with the chairman that will streamline the federal permitting process. Mr. Hendricks, you mentioned that in your testimony, and I appreciate your comments. And most important, to ensure that there's a shot clock that these federal agencies have to abide by. Mr. Wininger, you mentioned that in your own legislation back in Arizona and the difference that that made. I agree with you and believe that we should do that at the next level, which is our level. So I guess I want to start with Mr. Downs and ask if these federal agency complaints that I get from the state of Nevada, are they common across the country?
So
at least in the western portion.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And the funny thing is, I think my understanding is that much of the fiber infrastructure for California is actually built just on the Nevada side of the border because the California people made it even more difficult than in Nevada. So there's no question that a lot of these delays have no public interest value whatsoever. And again, shot clocks, I mean, even the shot clocks that exist right now in wireless, they're very generous in terms of how many days that they are. And I think, yeah, certainly in the western United States, in the Intermountain region, where obviously most of the land, or much of the land, is federally owned, not surprisingly, that's the complaints you hear most are about federal management.
Mr. Downs, is this an issue with process, or is it an issue with resources? Or is it just an accountability issue that we're dealing with some of these agencies?
Well, it's some of all of those. It really depends on, who you're talking about and where you're talking about. In a lot of cases, there are no processes. A lot of cases, certainly, there is resource constraint as well. Obviously, federal agencies as well as municipalities, they don't really have competition per se. So if you're not getting your permits done as quickly as you'd like from them, it's not like you're going to go somewhere else to get them. And I think that's actually where the solution comes in. As I say, the best incentive is to build up sort of competitive spirit. And we saw how Google did that so brilliantly in the initial rollout of Google Fiber, getting all those cities to compete, not by offering money, not by offering tax incentives, but by offering to streamline their processes, appoint a single point of reference, give access to city buildings and other property. And I think as the states and the localities start to recognize the real economic opportunity that 5G and next generation wired internet provides, you're going to start to see more of that, these locations will say, we want that development here, we want to be leaders in that, and they will suddenly discover just how much better a job they can do, even given the resource constraints they have. Yeah,
but my problem when I talk about process is with the government agencies themselves. It doesn't matter. Nevada's 110,000 square miles. It doesn't matter which community I go to, they will tell me that their BLM office is the worst when it comes to dealing with that. And I'm going to guess that it's true in any other state that I go to. But right now, I'll tell you that Pahrump believes that the office in Las Vegas is the worst in the country because they can't get these applications through. How do we hold these agencies accountable?
So my experience, Senator, is certainly more at the local and state level, not with the BLM and other agencies. But you control the power of the purse, and that's where you can hurt them or get them where you want them. Again, minimum requirements for how quickly they deal with things, and penalties, I suppose, to the extent that Congress can implement them for agencies that just don't follow the rules that are set up, particularly with their reasonable rules.
Now, Mr. Weninger, you served with my son-in-law in the legislature.
Yes, I did, Senator. I know your daughter.
Have you solved these problems in Arizona, the problems that we're seeing in Nevada? What processes did you go through, not only for your own legislation, but what did you do to overcome? Because you have as much public lands as we do, at least close. How were you able to overcome some of these federal agencies and able to implement some of the programs that you've been successful at doing?
It's difficult. Basically, ours probably isn't going to affect the BLM land. We will still have to deal with that. But one thing we did is, on the legislation we did, is we put a shot clock within the shot clock. So you have to tell us within 20 days whether or not the application is complete or not. Because we don't want you running clear up to 70 days and say, well, no, we don't have everything. But then that's within the 75 days, so it's not in addition to. And so I think that helps a lot. But we have the same problems you do. I think somebody else mentioned it's because so much of our land is federal land that we're kind of held captive by that in the West.
Thanks for the question. I sit in the chair, so I got to go 8 or 9 minutes, right, Mr. Chairman? Mrs. Klobuchar.
All right.